A little bit about Mid-Atlantic Tab. We are presenting today's webinar. We are a collaboration between leading programs at Marshall University, the University of Delaware, Virginia Tech, and West Virginia University. The TAB program provides technical assistance to communities and stakeholders to help address their brownfield sites and to increase their understanding and involvement in brownfields cleanup, revitalization, and reuse. Some of the speakers you'll be hearing from today include Matt, Kate, Carrie, and myself. Others you'll hear from today are Ty and Sherby, who'll be discussing their brownfields projects. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Carrie.
Thanks, Haley. Welcome, everyone, to our first Bring Your Own Brownfields webinar. We're very excited to chat with our two great projects today, and we're glad you're with us. As Haley said, please drop your questions in the chat, and Becca is asking everyone to introduce themselves as well so we can know who all is there. And today we're going to hear from our two projects. We've got a couple of panelists who are going to provide immediate feedback, and then at the end, we'll also take feedback and questions and recommendations from the audience. So drop those in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. If there's anything that might make sense in line, like clarifying questions, especially put those in the chat and we'll try to ask them in real time. Otherwise, if you have recommendations or ideas or questions for our projects, again, we will open it up at the end. So up first, we have a great project from Erie, Pennsylvania. Just to set the stage a little bit, Matt created some infographics to tell us a little bit about Erie. Of course, it is in Pennsylvania on Lake Erie, with a good size of blue collar industry, although mostly half white collar. About half of the community owns their own home. Bit of diversity among age of housing stock and educational attainment, and a good distribution of age. Next slide. Places that make the community richer and their community better. This gives us a good picture of the different things like restaurants, entertainment, spiritual centers, healthcare that are happening in Erie, number of playgrounds and parks. So keep these things in mind, things that exist already as we're talking about reuse for a site. Today, we're not going to plan the reuse, but if we have suggestions for what might make sense, this is good information to have in our brains. Next. Some more information on the housing market. Median home value is lower than the national or the state average pretty significantly. Percentage of income going to mortgage, however, is at a good 15.6%. And you can see there some additional information about household income and home values. Next one. And then this is really tiny. So additional information on housing and home ownership, race, age, etc., how long they've lived there. Vacant housing, which I think all of our communities in Region 3 and probably across the country are dealing with. Again, that home ownership rate that we talked about before. So that gives you a little bit of a background on Erie. Give you a minute to look at that. I think that's my last one before we hand it over to Ty. And I'll let her introduce herself to you.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you everybody over at TAB. One of my favorite stories actually about when I first got into brownfields is that when I met these guys, I totally fangirled on them, like was like bowing to them and embarrassing them, and I'm still a little bit that way. But yeah, I pretty much almost made a fool of myself the first time I met them, but I am so indebted to them and the DEP and the EPA and the people who have answered so many questions along the way so that I can sort of kind of pretend like I almost know what I'm doing at this point. So thank you guys for making me look good. Okay. Oh, and Carrie wanted me to introduce myself. So I'm Ty. With the Erie County Redevelopment Authority up in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I do grant writing and I oversee our brownfields projects. So the one we're going to talk about today is the Erie Coke site. And We partnered with the Erie Western Port Authority a couple years back to make this site be something usable at some point in the future. This site is approximately 100 land acres and 100 water acres. It is an example of teamwork at all levels. The EPA has been active on this site. The DEP has been active on this site. For anybody outside of Pennsylvania, the Department of Environmental Protection is the Pennsylvania State Environmental Agency. They've been hugely helpful, both the local office and in Harrisburg. The Erie Western Port Authority, the Erie County Redevelopment Authority, and the elected officials have all jumped on board to make this project become, at some point, a success story. So far, DEP has spent approximately $2 million on the project so far. Honestly, I pulled that off their website. I am amazed at how much they got done for $2 million. If it's only $2 million still, it's very impressive. They've been active on the site since 2022. The EPA has a $6 million lien on the property. They were active on the site from 2020 until 2022, and they did some early sort of preliminary cleanup. They did some site investigations, and they did some demo. The Erie Port Authority has also invested hundreds of thousands in legal fees, environmental consultants, planning consultants, and security around the property. As you can imagine, taking on a property like this is a very expensive endeavor. So, coke plants produce coke by heating coal at extremely high temperatures of around 1200 degrees Celsius, which is approximately 2200 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take 1000 degrees. The coke is then used during steel manufacturing and or the melting process. So in the bottom slide there to the bottom left of the overall slide, what appears to be green in the top right corner, that's actually the water. I apologize for how this picture came out. But this is an aerial view well above the coke site. The coke site actually runs from the road that looks like an S, kind of down to the left middle of that side, and then the road that runs across below it, and then the water borders the rest of the land area of Coke. That's approximately 100 acres. There's a large portion of this property that looks like it is maybe safe or not contaminated. As you can see, there's lots of brown trees. This is probably taken in spring or fall. Thanks to the DEP's investigations, we know that every single, I can probably say square foot and not be exaggerating, every single square foot of this property is contaminated. You can also see in this picture how the close proximity to many businesses, recreational areas, and residential structures. I don't think you can see it I don't know if you can see it in the slide at the bottom, but to what would be the right of the property, there is a boat launch. To the top kind of left is a marina and a campground. To the left is a sand and gravel company, as well as the wastewater treatment plant, because why put all the dirty things anywhere except for right beside the water, of course. The site was used for industrial manufacturing from approximately 1833 to 1925 when it became a coke production facility until 2019. After multiple violations, the DEP shut them down in December of 2019. I can tell you there was a celebration around town when that happened. The EPA took over the site from 2020 to 2022, removing 208,000 gallons of sludge, demoing buildings, and sampling and preparing hundreds of large-scale drums and totes containing hazardous materials for disposal. The DEP then took over control of the property again in 2022, after which they took hundreds of soil borings, installed dozens of monitoring wells, and conducted and provided to the public multiple site investigation studies, all of which are available on their website. DEP is also currently developing a remedial alternatives analysis report with the intent to reveal the report in fall of this year. And I have to say, as someone who has at least had some experience in brownfields, that's a really helpful report to have, or it will be. And it would have been very costly for us, I think, to put together. So we really appreciate the people who have been hands-on from the beginning to go that extra step. I think next slide, please. Okay. Jumping ahead a little bit. So the bottom slide, I like to include the bottom slide here, the bottom left, simply because that's one of my favorite parts of the property. It gives a really good kind of scale. Those walls are 20 feet high. That is where the former coal yard was, and it held approximately 100,000 cubic yards of coal at one point. The slide that's off to the right, that is actually in the middle there. You can see where it's very black, like the rest of the property, but it's black between those concrete pillars, and that is where the coal yard once was. There were also two coke batteries on site, and the coke batteries housed approximately 58 coke ovens at one time. And the coke ovens, of course, are where the coke is made. And next slide, please. Oh, and then we go to, so here's where I turn it back to Carrie or Matt, I believe.
Thanks, Ty.
Yeah.
Matt, kick us off.
All right. Yeah, so definitely an interesting, exciting site. One of the things, and I guess to introduce myself, I'm a community planner by trade and vice president of our Ayers Associates Development Services Division. So what we try to do is to take a look at sites from early conceptual, how you would start to even talk about redevelopment, and then move them through the process of identifying a vision, funding opportunities, and tackle those environmental issues so that you can ultimately have an excellent contributing property in your community. So the first thing that I did when looking at this site was I went to good old Google Earth and did a tour and a spin around of what some of the neighboring facilities were. And I think, looking at it, as was mentioned, to the right of the site, there's a boat launch and some recreation facilities. There's a campground nearby. A little bit further to the left down the coast, there's marinas and some maritime activity. But the other thing that I don't know that was mentioned was across the waterway, there's a state park that's present there. And there's actually a water taxi from one of the marinas. And so it's an interesting area that has a wide array of uses that could potentially come about to reuse this site. What I look at as a planner is that long-term vision and communicating what that vision could be so that it can sustain that momentum over time. This is definitely not a one and done kind of project. It's going to require a lot of different investment and activity in cleaning up. And I guess the observation that I would have is the critical nature of the vision and reuse plan, being able to set that tone for a direction that will deviate over the course of the next 20 years, but will help people to take incremental steps in celebrating a cleanup of a certain area or potentially phased redevelopment so that you have the ability to use that redevelopment to continue motivating activity. So I think that is the first thing that comes to mind. And Ty, I think you said that folks are working on a reuse vision and a reuse plan. I think the important thing is to remember the importance of that type of a document in first making sure that you have a good understanding of what the community is interested in. So with this, I think it could easily go to continue as an industrial site. Obviously, the access to the water is a huge benefit to it. You've also got rail access, so certainly could continue as an industrial site. But you do have homes that are within walking distance. You've got recreation activities, potential for some commercial activities. So there's a lot that could be done here, and those market dynamics are going to change over time. So you do need a plan to help keep people moving forward without getting too disappointed and distraught. So I'll pause there and throw it over to Kate for some comments.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Hey, everyone. My name is Kate Green. I work with Atlas Community Studios. Our team is focused on asset-based economic development, and we have a kind of a full-on commitment to implementation. So a lot of our a lot of our work is devoted to the pre-development work that you need to be implementation ready and investment ready. And so certainly a lot of the stuff that Matt has covered here is the kind of stuff you need, right? You need to know what the reuse is. You need to know, what aligns best with the overall vision of the community, what ties into the plans, your comprehensive plan, all the things that are, kind of representative of what you can do sustainably, what's market supported, all that good stuff. I know, we kind of had a little chat prior to everyone joining us, just to kind of make sure that we had a better understanding of where Ty and her crew are in this project. And $100 million is not a little bit of money. That's a lot of money. And I wonder, Ty, if you could tell us a little bit about what y'all have done so far in terms of, like, have you secured any cleanup dollars? Have you taken any steps forward towards cleanup dollars? Or are we literally starting at the beginning to say, here's a roadmap, and kind of trying to identify some of the possible targets?
Yeah, so we're fortunate in Erie County to have an EPA assessment grant. So we were able to do the phase one and kind of, get that situated and where it should be. As far as cleanup money, as you can imagine, that's a bit of a steeper hill to climb. We did receive, we believe, I don't think we've heard the final word yet, but I believe that we just received a HUD EDI in this last round. That's specific to demo. As you could see in the slides, the EPA did demo a lot of the buildings that were there, but there's still a substantial amount of demo left to do. So we're starting with kind of a $2 million grant. The next round is opening soon for EDIs, and we will apply again. And that's kind of our current way of chipping away at it.
Okay. And I think too, with this idea of, if in fact, a community supported, market supported reuse plan is still taking shape, there are certainly some of those foundational resources that you can tap into, regardless, right? Like the kind of the early money in to kind of help you keep moving the ball forward as you're doing some of that planning. And having taken a look at the folks that are in this room for this webinar, there is a ton of knowledge here. So, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, Carrie, but I feel like anybody in the room that wants to give a shout out here would be welcome. But the multi-purpose grants are incredibly flexible through the EPA. Up to $5 million, I believe, if somebody wants to correct me on that. But the multi-purpose grants can be pretty significant, and of course the cleanup grants, the RACP program in Pennsylvania, I believe, will support cleanup initiatives as well. And those could be, I think I saw in some of the research that some sites in the state have received upwards of 20 million towards cleanup efforts. So that could be something to look at. And again, I think those are probably some of the foundational pieces, just like those public dollars, that before you get further along in that process of really determining what that end use is going to be. And we all recognize too that the end use determines the degree to which the site is clean. So there's a lot of limitations there. But I think that there are some ways to get started so that it's not waiting, that you don't have to wait however long, before you can kind of get moving. So I guess I can kind of stop there too. And then we can talk more about like the middle layer and the final layer, because another piece that I think that we don't think about in cleanup is philanthropy. And philanthropy is starting to show up in a lot of really different ways now, especially given some of the shifts that we're seeing, just kind of at the federal level and the way that dollars are available. But Pittsburgh was able to move their waterfront projects forward with a lot of philanthropic support in those early phases in the cleanup space. So that's another piece and they're probably going to be more motivated or incentivized by some of the end use components as well. But I don't think you want to leave philanthropy out of the conversation. So anyway, I'll stop there and open it up for other feedback.
Thanks, Kate and Matt. Ty, any questions or thoughts for these folks? Based on what
I think they both had great input. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
And as you know, we're here for for the duration, for all fangirls and everyone else. And so I think, as we can help you as well. But one thing that jumps to mind is that we do have on our tab team folks who can do conceptual design. So as that reuse plan gets identified, if it would be helpful to have some drawings, we've also got some resources available for that. And then as we get into a reuse, really diving into a resource roadmap, for example, there are folks that we have here that could help put that together, both on the cleanup, identifying funding for cleanup and reuse side as that is possible. So those are just an example of some of the things the tab can do.
And Carrie, if I could jump in on that note, I think you do have the opportunity. So as much as the physical vision for the property is important, identifying that resource funding stack of opportunities of grants that you might pursue is also really important at this point in time, to be able to have a plan that clearly states, hey, we might use this grant or this funding mechanism, so that you have that track record in place to support pursuit of those grants. So right now you are you're positioning this property to be able to pursue as many different funding sources as you possibly can. So being able to identify different reuse scenarios can give you that flexibility to say, well, it could be recreation, so we want to keep our options open to pursuing recreational funding options. On the other flip side, you might have other public uses that might be an option that could open up other grant resources and opportunities. So just thinking through right now that you are establishing the foundation for this redevelopment through your planning activities, and making sure that you're working with your partners to include those different elements that can open up those doors for funding in the future.
Great. Thanks, Matt. All right, we're going to move on to Farmville, Virginia. Thank you, Ty, again for kicking us off and being our first presenter. All right, we have a very different project in Farmville. I'm very excited. What the exciting part for me about Brownfields is that it's such a range of projects that you might work on. So we started very industrial with a very large site, and now we're going to a little town in Virginia of Farmville, and we're going to talk about an old school that is much smaller than 200 acres. So you can see some information on Farmville on your screen here, talking mostly again about employment and housing, educational attainment. There are a couple of colleges in Farmville, a community college and a small private college, as part of the backdrop of the community. Next slide. Again, as we're thinking about helping our friend Sherby in Farmville talk about and think about the reuse of her project, an idea of the kinds of things that are in town, lots of education. As I said, there are a couple of colleges there. a lot of restaurants, public transit, spiritual centers, not as much recreation as we saw in Erie, which is interesting to pay attention to. But there are places for sports and some entertainment as well. Lots of healthcare access. Next slide. Again, some additional housing market characteristics. A higher median home value than we saw in Erie, but lower again than the state average. Excuse me. And you can see a little bit about the variations in housing stock and property age, as well as household income. Next slide. And then lastly, some additional information about home ownership, householder demographics, and once again, vacant housing units. As I said, that's an issue that we're seeing across the region and likely the country, I suspect. And you can see some of that information here as well. And with that, I believe I'll turn it over to Sherby to tell us about the Mary Branch School.
Hi, again, I'm Sherby Scott Brown. I am the Vice President for the Mary Branch Heritage Center. And our mission statement is to serve a central facility for extended programs, enhance the quality of life from low and moderate income families in Prince Edward County, to provide partnership with entities that will help our county grow. And our vision statement is to operate primarily as an educational resource center, to provide after-school tutoring and homework assistance, to present summer recreational programs, to have social programs, movie nights, culinary classes, arts and crafts, and other events, to also provide basic computer classes that will be open to all community members, to provide preventive programs such as bullying, youth and domestic violence, substance abuse, health and personal safety, and decision making, to have support groups for life changing events, to work and have seminars on interpersonal relationships, financial literacy, to provide professional and workforce development, and also to provide opportunities for partnerships for veterans and other community members. And our biggest problem with this is funding, um, getting everybody to buy into what we're trying to do, to bridge the gap with race relationships and the Asian population, um, to create a welcoming atmosphere for gatherings, for people just to come in and just have a heart-to-heart talk with someone, to provide a safe place for members of our community, to create an environment for all of our community members to feel like they are welcome and they belong. A lot of people with, as I said earlier, with the history of how things ended up in Prince Edward County, still feel like they're sort of left out. And that's something that all of us like to be included. So we're trying to create an environment where everybody feels welcome from the beginning, when they walk in, the time that they're there, and the time that they leave. And funding is our major problem. As I said earlier, this school is 100 years old. The roof is completely collapsed. We've had a group to come in from Virginia Tech to do an assessment of asbestos. And of course, asbestos is a part of what's there in the building. And we're working very diligently with, when I hear $100 million, I'm saying, my God, I don't think our whole county is worth that much. But anyway, uh, funding is a big problem. And when we had an assessment made for what we would need for our school, it was $7 million to get everything done. So that's where we stand.
Sherby, before I toss it to Matt, could you just give us a quick review for the audience that joined us after our initial meeting about the history of the Mary Branch School?
Absolutely. The lady that it's named for, Mary Branch, was born in Prince Edward County. She was a college president in Austin, Texas for Tolson College. She's the first female president to be there. Um, she was the daughter of former slaves Tazewell and Harriet Branch. She attended Virginia State College. She received her high school education at the normal school there. She later became a member of the staff at Virginia State. Actually, a dormitory at Virginia State is named in her honor. Um, this lady was very instrumental in what happened in Prince Edward County. They honored her by naming the school after her. This particular school was the school that was for Black children in Farmville. And when school closed, that school was closed, and people didn't, they didn't have school. A lot of people went to different places to continue their education. Appomattox and Charlotte County were two of the places that people did go. Lunenburg County, people went there as well. I've even had a lady to give her story about how her family went to Appomattox County. Her dad rented a house. They actually put curtains inside to make it look like they lived there. That they would catch the bus there to go to school in Appomattox, but they didn't live there. So a lot of people got kind of creative with trying to get their children educated, and that part of our history is still here. History's not going to leave. So the part that we know that we need to understand moving forward is to let it know that it is history, but don't let it define what our mission is. Our mission is to embrace it, to understand it, but to reach forward for a future that's going to be better for all of us. So that's what we're trying to do. We know that what has happened has happened. We can't let it be a crutch and not move forward from it. But we also need to be reminded that it is a part of our fabric, it's a part of who we are, and to make positive commitments to our community to make everybody understand that we are much better together. So that's how we look at what the Murray E. Branch Center is going to be, the history of it, the history of public education in Prince Edward County, and how a lot of people were able to get past it. Some people actually got educated in other places and came back here to be teachers in this county. So it's a painful past, but at the same time, it's a part of our history. And we don't want it to be something that continues to divide us, but to let us know we're much better together. Okay?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sherby. I'm going to hand it off to Matt.
All right. Sherby, can you give a little bit of information on the vision for the future? So the plan that's on the screen right now is kind of the vision that was developed under a previous architectural study. Can you give
Yes.
some information on that?
Yes. We were very fortunate to get connected with Virginia Tech. One of my former students was a professor at Virginia Tech, and he had a multitude of resource people that he knew. And this particular architecture firm drew this, made this design for us. And as I said before, we wanted to be a part of our community where everybody within the community can come to the Murray Branch Center, have a chat with someone, their friends can come there, maybe have a little tea, a little whatever. We want to make this part of our community a welcoming part for everybody, to take down those barriers that are still here, and to be able to engage with each other in positive conversations, to look at how we can make this Prince Edward County a place that's, even though we know the past is not pretty, but we want to make the future something that's comfortable for all of us. That's what we want to do. have programs that everybody wants to be a part of. If you can't come in and be with us, let us know what is it that I can do to help it to be better. As I said, I know I've said this a couple of 3 or 4 times, but we are much better when all of us work together for a common goal that's going to be productive for all of us. And I will always believe that. We have more things that we are liking than more things that we are different. And knowing that the human being is something that in this earth, that's what we have a conscience. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us understand each other. But because we have feelings about things that we need for each other. And when we understand that as human beings, it's make us much better together. Did I answer your question, or I just said a whole lot of nothing?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think the couple of things that you hit on there is that the center portion of the building, and you can kind of see in that lower left hand, that the main historic building would be turned into a multi-purpose event and community room that would host some of those dialogues, those discussions that you were chatting about. Um, Educational initiatives. So additional classroom space would be built around the perimeter of the building, as well as providing options for life skills and workforce development to be able to help support that continuing education mission. And I think just in reviewing the overall concepts that you have for this site, the story is essential that this isn't just a project. It isn't an environmental study. And I think it's really important that we as practitioners realize that this is a community development effort first and foremost, that reflecting that values and story. And so having that strong vision, I think, is the great foundation that you've already built on with the report that you've already got in hand. I think the observation that I have is that we also need to be supportive in making sure that your community nonprofit is sustainable with the human capital that you have. And because that's what this project is going to take to be able to move forward. We're not talking about lease rates and highest and best return on investment. You're really talking about those human relationships. So so setting things up for grant strategies, I think, is going to be a really important piece. And so you almost have a parallel track. You have the roof project that needs to happen in order to stabilize the building, clean up that asbestos. But then you also need to make sure that you are maintaining the organization and giving you all the best chance to be able to move forward. So I'd be curious to see what Kate has as major ideas.
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts, but I will start, Sherby, just by saying that I think everything that you said was beautifully said, and it does speak just to the value and impact that a project like that can have on our community. And because of that, and because of how important what you said is, and because of all the different programming that you've identified for this building, this is going to sound really obnoxious when I say it, but I think that your $7 million target is not unrealistic at all. I think that that is a very achievable dollar amount. But to what Matt said, making sure that you have that foundation to be sustainable is going to be critical to unlocking those dollars. But I do obviously think that you can do it. I do think kind of in that funding conversation, when we talk about that urgent roof repair, securing the building is critical. And there are some different approaches that you can take once you kind of have a dollar amount in mind for what that roof repair is going to be. And I've kind of seen this play out in a number of different ways, both by making an appeal to the city, making an appeal to the county, and then I've also seen local foundations step in to provide kind of bridge support in that regard. And I've seen banks step in. And because it's a community project, I've seen them step in a really kind of favorable way. So I think that there are some, some opportunities. I know that the state Historic Preservation Office has a program. I think they're probably more geared toward emergency disaster relief type things, but I think it's worth some outreach and conversation to the Virginia SHPO just to see if they can provide some support in getting that roof addressed. But and I'd be happy to chat with you, later about some of those different options. But obviously getting that roof secured and getting your envelope secure is critical so that all these other steps that you want to pursue, can kind of matter. The one other thing that I just wanted to quickly address, and this is a conversation I think that you touched on briefly, but certainly, when we were kind of chatting before our guest joined us, is really about this idea of community buy-in. And I think I worked on a project in Elkhart, Indiana, that they were facing a really similar struggle, not around one building specifically, but around the fact that this city had so many brownfield sites, and they had such a history of industrialization and such a history of nothing being cleaned up that they were very scarred by this, right? So it's again a different context, but that kind of same idea of how are we just going to move forward with these sites and make them something new without honoring the fact or acknowledging the fact that this is how we got here. And so one of the things that we did was we just created a story map that allowed people to record their narratives. And so it was just an opportunity for us to feature a site and we just created a story arc, like this is the story of who we were. And this is a story of what this site was and what this was in our community then. This is what it is now, and this is what it's going to be. And it was a really kind of very cathartic process for people to start telling those stories. But what it started to do was it started to build community buy-in for this idea of honoring the past and kind of holding space for the past, but also then just like moving forward. So I think, I know that y'all have a website, and I think that there's a way for you to maybe use that tool or other tools, whether it's social media or whatever else, but a way to start capturing those stories, so that you can really kind of preserve this history and kind of honor the impact that it's had on people's lives. And maybe that would kind of shift the conversation around buy-in for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate and Matt. Sure, be any questions for Kate or Matt?
Not really questions, but just a sincere appreciation for the sensitivity that you all have shown about this project. I appreciate that because there are so many good things that I know that can still happen with the people that are still here. And trying to make sure that we preserve the importance of what this part of our history is, not to wallow in self-pity, but to make it something that people understand and to be able to move on from it. And I appreciate your sensitivity.
Thank you. So while our esteemed audience is coming up with their thoughts and ideas, I think feel free to drop in the chat or raise your hand. We've got a small enough crew that we can have folks unmute. I would just add along those lines, I think what you have planned and what Kate's suggesting are right on in honoring the history. The other thing I would say from a community buy-in perspective is frequent communication. It's going to take a while to do this. And this goes really for both projects, but especially I think for you, Sherby, making sure that people are getting updates as there are updates and keeping people engaged in that conversation throughout. And we often say around here that you should celebrate every milestone, right? So every little milestone can help to build momentum, help people feel engaged and not feel like, oh, they talked about that and now we haven't heard anything for 6 months, so it's probably never going to happen, which is common across all projects of all kinds and all communities of all sizes in my experience. And again, these are things that we can help with. All the things you've heard about today are things that the tab can help with for sure. And we will definitely be following up with both projects.
I just want to kind of piggyback with you and Kate and Sherby a little bit about the community buy-in. We have a project here in town that took place on a greenfields actually, and the I don't know, what do you want to call it, brainchild for the project started, I want to say 16 years ago. And it took having the right person at the redevelopment authority. It took having the right people, in elected offices. It took everybody working together and years of getting people on board. And the only reason that project ended up being successful, and we're actually still in the middle of the final or middle stage of it, but it finally was successful because along the way, there were always those core people who didn't give up on it and just kept the conversation going, like you were saying, always brought in the elected officials. And we finally had all the right people in all the right places at the right time. And the first greenhouse that went up is the commercial. It's called our commercial greenhouse, and that one will actually, money from that one will support a community greenhouse that will be run and used entirely by new Americans in the neighborhood. And it took, 18 different funding sources and I don't know, 8 different organizations to get that one off the ground, and 16 years later. So I just kind of wanted to reinforce what you guys all just said.
It's kind of tagging off of what Ty just mentioned. We had done a project in Campbell County, Virginia, at the Campbell County Training School recently. And similarly, while they had a strong vision for, it was a four building campus, and they had a strong vision for that. And so the technical assistance that was needed was maybe less on kind of the physical campus and how do we arrange the parking and some of those more technical items, but it leaned into that organizational strategy of how do we communicate the value of this project and this initiative to the broader community, to potential funders, and how do we keep our organization strong so that we can maintain that continued pressure over time and excitement to implement that vision. And so I guess I would maybe challenge our brownfield folks that are on the call that strategic planning and organizational development can be as an important of a brownfield tool as an ESA and a resource roadmap and some of those other things that we're more comfortable with using over time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
I'll kind of piggyback on that a little bit too, Matt, and it really kind of circles back to Ty's comment about, partnerships and building those, kind of that willingness to collaborate and buddy up. And to your earlier question, Matt, asking Sherby about the, kind of the young age of her organization. And so when you are going after, larger size, particularly when you get into that funding or federal funding space, if you go that route for support for this project, that is something that will be under a lot of scrutiny. So being able to identify other organizations that share your vision, your passion, and that are really aligned with you, kind of the values of your organization, so it's authentic, you can be partners with them and you can leverage the age and stability of those organizations to make you, to kind of build that investor confidence in the project and in the organization. And it doesn't mean you're giving anything away. It just means that you're just building capacity through partnership. And it is an important piece, especially since, again, kind of, you're so young in this endeavor. So yeah, that's, and there are a lot of really positive outcomes too, right? Because you're not just building capacity, you're building community. So I think that that's a good path forward as well.